Hello. Hi, how are you? Well, my name is Evan Kovacs. I'm an underwater cameraman, photographer. Anyway, I do a lot of work with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, where we design and build custom camera systems for hostile environments, which incidentally is mostly underwater. So over the last 10 years, I sort of got into the film world, and during that time became heavily involved in rebreathers. So during this thing, we're going to look at sort of my general CCR philosophy as it pertains to filmmaking. Some of the principal benefits in using closed circuit for filmmaking, general considerations, some of the pros and cons, and situations where we've chosen to use closed circuit and to not use closed circuit. And then if we have time, we'll do some questions. So back when I was a young man, I had a mentor of sorts who had an adage that he lived by, and he sort of drummed it into me. He always said, if you're going to do anything, do it right. Don't do it half-assed. If you're going to do it half-assed, don't do it at all. So I really tried, and that adage just sort of meant different things at different times in life. But for the most part, I really tried to apply that to everything I did for work and whatnot. And as I got into filmmaking and getting behind the camera, it became very obvious to me that closed circuit was definitely the right tool for the job. And I think many filmmakers across the globe have come to that same conclusion. But why? One of the key reasons, at least in my opinion, is time. Closed circuit is all about time for me. Nothing happens fast on a rebreather as opposed to open circuit, which is it's a very finite resource. You have a bottle, you have gas. When it's done, it's done. There are no other options. Your dive is over. Closed circuit gives you a tremendous number of options, both when dealing with emergencies and dealing with other issues, or just dealing with the environment. For example, sometimes we're down there shooting and we need that perfect combination of light. We need the fish to actually be in the shot. We've got fish wranglers, but the fish don't often respond right to the wranglers. Going down, trying to film shipwrecks sometimes. I've been on projects with people in this room where we've gone down to film a shipwreck and been hundreds of feet off of a wreck. We have a general idea as to where it is. Open circuit, it would have been over, and that would have been a lot of money potentially blown. But we made the decision to continue on, find the wreck, and continue shooting, or start shooting. Sometimes it's a big ship. Maybe it's a 1,000-foot shipwreck, and you're on the bow. You need to shoot on the stern. There's a lot more options that closed circuit can give you. Most importantly, for somebody like me, when I started off, I was a new guy. I had a very small talent, but I had ambition. And I needed as much time as I could possibly get in the water to practice. And I began a lifelong Visa card holder now, and this is what I call my little Visa slide. This is where I spent all my money for the last 10 years. Buying rebreathers, cameras, you name it, I tried it. And like I said, I will be saying, rebreathers are a fantastic, rebreathers are the fantastic tool for the job. And I'm always looking for that optimal tool. There's no one rebreather that's right for everything, at least not for me. There are different situations that require different things. Maybe it's electronic, maybe it's on your back, maybe it's semi-closed, maybe it's a side mount. But most importantly, closed circuit allowed me to literally take a breath, relax, and practice, and sort of learn that golden rule of shooting, which is that no matter what you're shooting, no matter where it is, no matter what it is, every shot needs to tell a story. And it takes a long time to sort of understand that, from a shooting point of view. It's not just going out and pointing the camera. It's when you're handing all your footage over to an editor and to a producer, and they come back to you and they're like, what the hell is this? It doesn't feel very good, and you learn very quickly why. They need to take the footage and cut it and process it and do things. So and actually turn it into something. And that ability to stay down there and experiment was absolutely pivotal and key. When I got started, I had been practicing. I'd been diving rebreather for a while, been buying cameras and practicing. And at the time we were doing a History Channel show, and I ended up shooting the last season. But it wasn't, hey, we're gonna, you want to start shooting a little bit here and there. It was, hey, we have a problem. You want to go do this dive and shoot? And I'm like, yeah, great. Where are we going? Well, it's a 300-foot dive. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Here's a new camera. And I mean, that's that's sort of, you're sort of a trial under fire, I guess. But, we went down and we did it, and we got the job done and did a pretty good job. So in the beginning, most of my dives and most of my film jobs were all deep. I didn't have the fortune of starting shallow. It was deep. It stayed deep for a long time. Most dives were below 200 feet, and that's the way they stayed. One of the principal benefits early on was just the gas logistics. We're going to faraway places. The gas logistics are infinitely easier with a rebreather. You guys have all probably seen the examples of a whole stack of tanks that you need to do one long deep dive versus which you need one small dive with a rebreather, and that was a fact. There were chutes that we could not do had it not been for a rebreather. It just would have been impossible to bring in the containers of helium that we would have needed. But for me, there was a very big psychological benefit of, initially I was always afraid of running out of gas. Now I was afraid of not getting the good shot and having producers scream at you. And that's actually running out of gas was a very, sort of something that was hammered in early on as I was helping people out and assisting. I actually helped 3 people who were behind the camera at the time. I was just assisting. Who they got what we call, what Richie appropriately calls cameraman disease, where you get behind, you're following the action, you're doing something, you miss a problem, and suddenly you're out of gas. It's happened to a lot of guys, and I didn't run out of gas, but I've had other closed circuit cameraman disease issues, which I could talk about later. Now, brings me to sort of my second part of sort of my closed circuit filming philosophy, which I call closed circuit in the art of improv. I kind of like this photo just because it shows 2 very complicated systems. One, life support, what we're all here talking about. The other, what I make a living at, building cameras and shooting them. Now, anybody that's been out with me knows that a lot of these cameras are prototypes and they're prone to issues at times. Unfortunately, not all those issues are on deck. They're often in 200 or 300 feet of water where we're having comms, and I'll have somebody from topside saying, hey, yeah, we don't have a camera, so can you start doing this? And, we basically have to start to dissect this stuff underwater. So that's where we're able to start improvising. Open circuit wouldn't be possible. You just don't have the time to really do that. You have a couple of minutes perhaps, but you just don't have that sort of opportunity. And by, removing, again, it was something I was obsessed with early on. When I started getting into deep diving, it was open circuit, probably like most people. And right before I went and did my first deep, dark New York dive, tying in on a submarine, I happened to read every book about all the people that just died on the submarine. And, Richie was there, and he could tell you, scared shitless. And that never really left me for a while, and until I got into closed circuit. And the fact that at least, I may die 100 other ways, but I'm not necessarily going to run out of gas anytime soon. It was huge for me. Bring this slide up because if anybody can figure out really like what's going on here, you have a job. I've been doing this for 10 years, and I still have to look at this for a while and figure it out. But this is the topside equivalent of what we were often working with underwater. And it brings us back to the whole need to assess, adapt, and possibly improvise. So, sort of to that end, when we assess what's our problem, is it life support? Can it be dealt with underwater? Not necessarily every problem is an emergency that has to go to, you need to go to the surface. A lot of times when we're doing these deep critical dives where we may only have one dive on something, we're getting in the water, well, we carry 2 different bottles of oxygen, a couple bottles of diluent. So perhaps we can swap things over. I mean, is it something that's critical, that's going to send us to the surface, or is it something that we can deal with down there? Maybe the assessment is we just don't have enough shots. Again, they've got a producer up there who's screaming and really itching for all the right stuff, but you don't have it. Closed circuit affords you the ability to perhaps do other things. So your adapt could be stay a little longer, go a little deeper. Can you do something without compromising safety? These are all big questions, but the biggest question is what constitutes an emergency when you're sort of working within this philosophy. That's something that I think our instructors and sort of our team, as a whole, we all need to sort of assess. But it's an important thing to remember and think about. Improvise, all right? I mean, we talked about it a little bit. We work on a problem. We often just don't abandon the dive. It's just not necessarily a possibility. That being said, I'm the first guy. If I've got a real problem, I've dropped cameras, I've thrown them to the bottom, I've bailed out. You can always go back for gear. And if you can't, it's only gear. There is no piece of gear, there is no production, there is no nothing that is worth somebody's life. So, although we're always talking about, okay, how are we going to fix this and work with this problem, it's never worth dying over. So the problem, it's not always about CCR. Sometimes you're taking a camera, an off-the-shelf housing. Maybe you guys have done this. You take something and you're going right down to that area that it's rated to, and all your buttons stick. Well, I've had that on a couple of shoots, and we used to go up, reset the camera, go back down, and keep filming. Go up, reset the camera, go back down. It's something that's difficult to do with open circuit. With some of our more complicated cameras, literally had to take. We have lots of magnetic switches that had gotten clogged up with rust. Couldn't work the camera, and again, it's a one-time dive. Been down there. I used to carry a screwdriver, carry a wrench on the camera, go down, actually start to take some things apart. These are things that I would never have ever done on open circuit, but closed circuit gives us that ability. A lot of things nowadays, they're fiber optically controlled. We run things to the surface, when that's a possibility. Well, there's always, can we reset fiber? Can we do this? Again, things that you might be able to try a little bit with on open circuit, but on closed circuit, I don't want to say sky's the limit, but you have a lot more options. And, last, you just have this freedom to experiment. No matter what it is, whether it's with the shot, whether it's, with your talent, whether it's, whatever. You can improvise, closed circuit gives you a freedom that open circuit just doesn't, at least in the deep ocean. So, many people might say you're missing the, one of the best features of closed circuit. I've sort of been focusing on the fact of the operations and the technical parts. But silence. Rebreathers are quiet. It's that quiet. And when it's that quiet, and you hear, something like that. I've seen, I've been on a wreck where I was down on a wreck where we actually were down to film grouper. Couldn't find him. I had a team. It was myself on closed circuit and a couple of people on open circuit. Shallow enough wreck, so they had to go up and change tanks. I stayed down on closed circuit. 15 minutes later, grouper show up, the giant grouper. And I'm hanging out, I'm filming them, and a couple minutes go by, and they start to mosey on down the wreck, with a speed that I couldn't really keep up. I'm like, well, what did I do? I guess I spooked them. But I stopped for a second, and sure enough, off in the distance, you could hear the train, the bubble train coming. And that is just key. If you're on open circuit, I don't care how good you are, you're missing stuff. There's stuff you are not seeing. There is action. There is fish life. There is, mammal life that you are just not getting close to unless you're breath holding. This is a, humpback whale down in the Dominican Republic. Anyway, most animals, no matter what, they don't like noise. So, and that's what open circuit ends up becoming, noise. However, even a closed circuit rebreather makes a noise. We recently had a shoot down in the Dominican Republic, down in the Silver Banks, and we were down to shoot humpback whales. We had special permits, we got permissions to go down and come across the bottom and slowly come into areas where the mothers and the calves were hanging out. So I went down, got all my stuff. For this particular job, I chose a semi-closed unit. I didn't want the solenoid going. It was a very slow trickle. Sort of set it, dialed it in for the depth that we were going to be going. And crept along the bottom, got really close. About 30 feet away from this 20-ton, beautiful, beautiful female whale. Her little calves hanging out underneath, and it brings a tear to your eye. Like, oh, this is so pretty. I want kids now. And just by instinct, I was a little heavy. And I'm sitting there, and I got the camera, and I'm trying to scull a little bit. Just click, hit the power inflator. I don't know who was more scared. This female whale whose fins went like this, the tail went like that, and was on top of me. In a split second. And of course, I'd freak out, and I've got a 20-ton whale coming after me, and dropped to the bottom. I thought I blew an eardrum, and she took off. Now, I got some of the most exciting whale footage I've ever gotten, But, it's not good for me, it's not good for the animals, and it's just something to keep in mind that as good as closed circuit is, there are things that, make noise on them. Like I mentioned, solenoids. Now, this is just, I don't know how true this is, but I know a couple of older cameramen who dive a rebreather who will not dive a rebreather around sharks, at least an electronic. Well, why not? Well, do you know what you have on your back? And I'm like, yeah, I have a rebreather. No, you've got a Mako magnet. Like, the hell's a Mako magnet? It's a big solenoid they hang off the boat to call in the sharks. Well, that's what you got on your back. And, it hasn't stopped me, but I don't know. Maybe there's guys here, this is the Rebreather Forum, maybe there's been studies on it, but just, I don't know, another little thing to think about. So, just some of the general pros for CCR diving. Standard. More time, less ego. All ties into that time thing. This sort of evens out a bit, perhaps, when you start going really deep, but then the logistics come into play. You don't necessarily need anywhere near as much gas for these long, far-away shoots. And again, like I said earlier, there were times we wouldn't do the shoots at all had it not been for rebreathers. It just would have been practically impossible. I personally feel that rebreathers added a tremendous amount of safety on deep dives. And again, that's what a lot of the time what we end up focusing on. But even on shallow dives, shallower dives, which I'll qualify later. Simplified team logistics. Again, you've got a team of 6 guys doing a 300-foot dive. On a small island in the Pacific, and this is supposed to be taking place over 2 weeks. Just imagine the amount of helium you would need for for that kind of thing. We're not talking a couple of K bubbles. We're talking container loads of helium. Not to mention oxygen. It's just again practically impossible. Not just the practicality of it, but on a film project, very few people, very few organizations are willing to just throw in, millions of dollars, unless it's the National Park Service, to make it happen. But for the most part, you've got very, very, people that are driven by the bottom line, and that's what's driving things nowadays. So there's a thermal advantage. I think that's pretty evident. Again, silence. That for a wildlife filmmaker is probably the single most important feature. But for me, it's the freedom to experiment. So again, I'd be remiss if I didn't get into some of the cons, and there are plenty. Shallow water stuff can be very cumbersome. Why bother when I'm going to dive? Well, there are reasons, but when I'm at 20 feet, it's cumbersome, it's large, it's heavy. There is nothing more free than a nice single lady when you have the opportunity. Electronics and water, this is sort of an old thing. Obviously, electronics have gotten much better. Everything's gotten much better. But one of the things I look at when I'm choosing a rebreather for a project is, were a component to flood, how does that affect the rest of the unit? And yes, you may be bailing out. Yeah, you're probably going to the surface. But does it knock the entire rebreather out? Do you still have options to stay on and monitor your PO2? Things of that nature. Hard work in shallow water is a very bad situation on a rebreather. I don't know if you saw the camera that we were working with earlier, but I've been in situations where I've been pushing that thing in a current, very shallow, almost passed out on the surface. This, you'll hear it again and again. Single most important thing, monitoring your PO2. This was, Richie talked about this earlier, the cameraman that had a new face mask on one day that the producers needed me to wear. And I was like, okay, that's fine, no problem. We jumped in the water. I couldn't quite see my heads-up display. I could see it if I just pushed up on the loop a little bit. Couldn't quite see it, but I'm like, I'll just muscle it up now and again. And everything was fine. So I hit about 60, 70 feet, dropped down, and we just went into shot after shot after shot after shot. And shame on me, I missed my PO2. And during that time, my rebreather stopped working completely. And so I happened to do this shot where these guys are swimming away, and I went to do a kick. And my vision went like that instantly, and all I remember was dropping the camera, one hand going to add dill, the other one going for my PO2 to see what it was. And basically, one was spiked, one was about 11%, and the other one was dead. No idea what the PO2 was, what I was breathing, and at that point it was just, strict survival. And, I'm one of the lucky guys. I've had a handful of stories like that have, I'm very fortunate. I was with a good team. On my own, I probably would have been dead. But with a good team of people, and I made it back. But the things that you don't want to forget, and you certainly want to pass on. And just the continual insidious nature of CCR, CO2, hypoxia, hyperoxia, all the things that can go wrong. You got to know them, you got to be aware of them, and take all these things into consideration when you're planning on what you're going to use. Just a couple quick examples of what open circuit, closed circuit. Open circuit, USS Arizona, shallow dive, tons of support, no real need to dive closed circuit on it. We're not filming fish. It was a perfect place to use open circuit. All right, in the water, corals. We weren't necessarily there to film fish. So, and we decided to go open circuit. Again, simple, easy, shallow stuff. There are reasons why you might want to go closed circuit on some of these, but again, it's going to sort of be on a case-by-case basis. Deep shipwrecks. This is part of a mosaic project that we're doing with Johnson Historical Society to go out and mosaic all these shipwrecks. But most of them are 200 foot or deeper. And we're dealing with that whole host of camera issues on stuff like that. So closed circuit just gives us that time. And to go down and not just do a single mosaic run, but potentially to go down and in one dive mosaic these things and film them in ways that they just haven't been done before. Closed circuit caves. I mean, for me, 90% of all caves, I would dive in a rebreather almost constantly and exclusively. Shallow side mount caves. There's 100 reasons why I would dive that, especially with a camera on a rebreather. Wildlife. I mean, I think we covered that fairly well. And just something else to kind of think about. One of the best tools for a lot of deep work is the ultimate rebreather, submarines. I mean, that's really what they are. You're inside your rebreather, and it just lets you get to places that you just can't get to otherwise. And both groups, both the submarine group and the closed circuit world, have different things to learn from each other. Working in submarines for the last couple of years, found some very interesting things applying to some of the closed circuit stuff we've been doing. But anyway, that's it. The photos are from a lot of different people. But I think we have a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, if you have any questions. Otherwise, thank you for